It is necessary now for us to correct certain assumptions that have been made in your world about life and the universe. These assumptions give you a very false impression of what is really happening in the worlds in your vicinity, how engagement between races is conducted, and the freedom and the lack of freedom that exists in a highly inhabited part of the universe. These are the constraints of living within a greater community. Constraints that have benefits and limitations. The benefit for you is the relative peace that exists in this part of the galaxy, where nations are not attempting to conquer each other through the use of force, where outright violence is extremely rare, and where you do not have to concern yourself with invading armies and armadas of ships approaching your world. You live in a very civilized and constrained region of space. Nations behave because they are dependent upon one another. Having faced the depletion of their resources, they have, through persuasion and necessity, become dependent upon one another and therefore very much rely upon stable relations with one another. Yet resource explorers and economic collectives still abound, engaged in trade, both legal and illegal, undertaking activities that most worlds would not directly engage in within this region of space. You will not be able to travel freely should you escape the limits of your solar system. Trade routes are established and are maintained for those races that use them. Some are extremely private. Some are very large and engage with systems far outside this region. Here you cannot go wherever you want, and travel is relatively slow. Interdimensional travel has proven to be extremely dangerous. It has been the experience, in this part of the universe at least, that those who attempt it never return, for the portals are always moving and cannot be mapped or navigated reliably. Those who pass through them into another dimension find themselves either in someone else's territory or in a reality in which they cannot survive. There is a reason there are boundaries between these dimensions. You cannot go from one end of the galaxy to another. Indeed, no one has ever traveled the length of the galaxy that we are aware of. To leave one's district is to leave the safety and security of one's own sphere of influence. To travel outside this highly inhabited part of space is to enter areas that are dangerous and perhaps uncharted, where piracy is common and where you may enter another's territory unknowingly, thus putting yourself at extreme risk. Nations that live outside of well-established regions such as this maintain a very tight security, for they are very exposed to the uncertainties and the dangers that abound in the greater community. Free races engage with one another but rarely travel in larger regions of space. Not being engaged in vast networks of commerce, they seek to remain hidden and thus secure. There is long-range travel and trade, but only on established routes where security has been provided amongst member states. Members in the organizations that run and oversee these routes of trade. If you are not part of such an association, you would not have access to these avenues of travel. Any attempt to travel outside of these avenues is considered very risky. For outside the routes of trade there is the illegal trade, and here there is much danger to one's security. There is a reason why nations unite together for their defense, to establish their own networks of trade, to assure each other access to vital resources, to maintain stability in their regions and to counter any move at conquest or the expansion of an empire. Large empires are rare in the universe, as we have mentioned. They are inherently unstable and difficult to maintain. Most nations represent one race, with variations of that race bred for certain purposes if collective breeding is undertaken by a world at all. Collective breeding has proven to be difficult with unforeseen consequences. The collectives use it, but only for very specific tasks. The environmental barriers are significant in space and are approached with extreme care and concern. Races in different worlds rarely visit each other freely. Only between free nations that have had long-standing contact with each other and understand one another's environments thoroughly is this done with any laxity at all. Very rarely will you find worlds where many different races coexist. And certainly not amongst trading nations where environmental or biological hazards can be introduced from outlying regions. As nations choose to live in higher states of technology, they become less and less adapted to natural environments, and the biological threshold therefore becomes extremely important and extremely hazardous. Attempts have been made to establish colonies on Earth, but these colonies have all failed because of the biological hazard. The native races of your world were far too primitive to be considered important relations. Important enough to establish major interbreeding activities. Attempts have been made to influence earlier cultures in your world, but the results have not been significant. Those who are intervening in your world today do not represent races who have visited long ago, and thus have no right or claim to this planet or to any inherent association with the human family. You will be encountering are physical beings driven by physical needs. They are not demons. They are not angels. They will exploit you if they can, for you have not established yourself as a united race with any potency in the greater community yet. And until you do, others will seek to take advantage of the value of this world and your presence here. There are great spiritual powers in the universe, but do not confuse them with those who are intervening in your world, or you will make a critical and perhaps fatal error in judgment. Freedom is rare in the universe that we are aware of from what we have learned over many centuries from engaging with races from afar and from receiving contacts from afar. The circumstances that we experience in these local regions of space are very similar in other areas as well. Only in uncharted territories or in regions that are sparsely inhabited by technologically advanced races are the circumstances very different. These regions pose unique hazards even to a race that seeks to be insulated and isolated. They pose unique hazards. That is why uncharted territories remain uncharted. For space exploration is only peripheral and is never carried very far. Ships require fuel. Fuel cannot be resupplied. Explorers enter regions where there are unknown forces. Explorers encounter environmental and logistical problems. Visiting terrestrial planets always has a biological hazard if they contain a large biological presence. Many groups have become sickened and have perished. Travel in the universe is a very difficult and formidable task. Its distances are incredibly vast, and once you leave a known territory, you are on your own. If you do not have proper charting and maps, becoming lost is very easy, and finding your way back very difficult. Nations use transmitters to communicate with distant travelers. But beyond a certain distance, it is impossible to locate a ship. This represents the limits of technology, limits that the human family has not reached. The human family dreams of unlimited power and abilities in the universe, thinking they can go wherever they want, do whatever they want, and meet whomever they want. But, alas, the reality is so very different.